Alrighty, we're here for another video. Let me take my glasses off.
Oh, welcome.
Okay, so
Cool.
Yeah, welcome. Hi, I'm Emily.
Hey, I'm Percy.
And today our video is going to be on why are relationships such a battle, and we're going to be sharing the deeper truth of what you didn't know about relationships.
This will be fun because I have a friend that actually allowed me to share this, actually begged me to share this because she thought it was very useful when we talked about it. And she said, why don't you put this on the YouTube channel? It opened, she was talking about this relationship and this issue, and she was all like, oh, this is the story and these are the details. And oh, this is what I think is happening with him, and oh my gosh, he's so resistant and it's frustrating and da 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 da. She said something in particular that really cued me off, and she was like, yeah, we've been in this battle, and I've got an army helping me out, and he's got an army of support helping him out, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a battle? Like, I thought this was a relationship. Like, why are we talking about battles here? And so that cued me off that something was off. Because if a relationship is healthy, we don't want it feeling like a battle, like there's two people against one another.
Well, but the thing is, most relationships, if you ask a lot of people who've been married a long time, like, it's the same battle that we have over and over again, the same argument.
Oh, it's always a battle. Yeah. A friend of mine who I asked, who's married, I was like, what's good about marriage? And he was like, yeah, it's good to be, in the trenches with someone, except a lot of times it feels like the person that you're in the trenches with is the one that you're fighting. So I'm like, okay, so once again, what's good about marriage? But we'll do that video later.
Okay.
But in any case, the situation of a relationship feeling like a battle is a really uncomfortable one for a lot of people that I hear a lot, and nobody wants relationships to feel like a battle. So how does it end up this way? In this situation, what I first noticed with this person is that she was her head was really preoccupied with what was happening over on his side of the field.
Battlefield.
On his side of the battlefield. So this is what he's thinking, and this is what must be happening inside of him. I was like, what's going on inside of you? And she was like, he first says this, and then he really doesn't mean it because he keeps doing that. And I'm like, wait a second. What's happening with you? Like, not him. Once we got focused on her, we found something really interesting, because I did know that she had this part.
Call them Dick and Jane.
Okay, great. So Jane had this part of her that really perceived her being in a battle and was frustrated and was trying to constantly strategize and figure out what's happening. It was an analyzer. It was kind of like, I was like, what is this, a military general? So yeah. So
it's a battle.
we've got General Jane here. and General Jane, I asked her, okay, this general part that's really trying to strategize for what's going on with Dick, no relation to Dr. Schwartz.
Dr. Dick Schwartz, our mentor.
Right. What is this general afraid would happen if it just stopped fighting? She said, well, I am gonna lose the battle. I'm gonna end up without anyone. I'm gonna end up feeling alone. So I said, okay, so there is really a part here that is afraid of having this feeling and really sensitive of having the feeling of feeling alone. Like, is there a part of you that feels alone? And she said, yeah, there's a part that feels alone that constantly feels that way, has felt that way for a long time in a lot of different situations. And say, okay, so is it true that this general is trying to protect you from feeling alone? And she said, yeah, the harder I fight, if I fight hard enough and I strategize hard enough, then I'm going to end up getting into this connection. I'm going to end up having the connection that I want. There's this part of her that is feeling alone, and it's really driving this general forward. And the general is constantly preoccupied with what's happening on Dick's end. Who's the general feel like they're battling with? And it's like, oh, well, I keep trying to get closer, and he just keeps resisting, keeps bringing up excuses of why we can't hang out together, or a lot of different things that he does to push her away. So there's a part there that's resisting. I get that. So the general really perceives itself in a battle between this part that's resisting. You noticed here we have terms of parts that are more protective and parts that are more vulnerable. So this, kind of protector part is in a battle with
this protector
part. So it's really a protector-protector relationship. That's the only way that it can seem like a battle. If you're thinking about, if you're having, the defense of a person fighting the defense of another person.
I think there's a concept that we probably need to bring up here is
Sure.
that women who are of feminine essence, and some men are of feminine essence, the number one primary driver of that essence is love and connection. Whereas masculine essence, it's about freedom.
Okay. So that's one concept, and probably the case for this general, that this general was really pushing for that love and connection from this other person, and perceives Dick as resisting that. We've got to protect.
This general fights harder and harder. It's like, we're gonna win this battle.
What's going to happen? There's going to be a part there that's resisting more and more. What I kind of thought of is, well, this general probably is triggering a vulnerable place in Dick. So this general is really analytical and really driving forward. And try to imagine, like, I don't know what's happening in Dick. However, if I were in a relationship with someone that was really pushing for something and really like trying to make something happen with me, and I would feel like, oh, well, goodness gracious, this person is expecting a lot. I might need to defend myself. Or like, they're being awfully critical of how I'm responding. I might just not feel good enough. I feel a little bit either like objectified, but it would put me on the defensive. I'd feel like kind of an object that someone's trying to control. I would have some sort of exile here, like someone's trying to control me, like I'm not good enough as I am. So let's just say not good enough.
So the exile is the inner child parts, the younger parts of us that are frozen in some childhood memory that took on some beliefs because of a significant emotional event. Like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not worthy of love.
More simplistic, you could say like it's some vulnerable feeling. It's a part that's holding on to some vulnerable feeling. And Emily's right. Usually that is from, it comes from a childhood experience that has one feeling something like not good enough. So
maybe
not good
it's
enough, not man enough, like...
man up, or if a father said, man up, boys don't cry, or how come you're not as good as your brother in athletics, or if a teacher says, you're never going to amount to anything, I doubt if you could even get into college. Right. So if those authority figures said anything like that, you're not as smart as your brother, those parts of us get frozen, and it shows up in relationships in so many different ways. Yeah,
or if, for instance, let's say another example of what this general might bring over me is feeling like I'm being like dominated or controlled.
And that could bring up feelings of watching one parent dominate another.
Yeah. That's a good example. Yeah. Right. If you have either been controlled in relationships, or if one had a controlling parent, they might be sensitive to the feeling like, I'm powerless, I'm weak. Might be this feeling that the general brings out in this person. So the general comes over and says, I'm going to make this happen. I'm really pushing for it. And then this other person feels dominated and controlled, and that's not comfortable. That feels very vulnerable. And you know what? We'll find ways to push back. They may or may not be conscious of that, but that's what will happen. And what's this resisting part do? Cuts off the connection and causes her to feel alone, and so on. And then that triggers the general, and then that triggers so you find yourself in the infinity loop. Usually in these relationships, it's all about that infinity loop, So
it's that dance that just keeps going back and forth, and this battle of trying to get the dance right of intimacy and connection, but both people are operating from vulnerable parts that are actually driving the protector battles.
Right. And who's showing up in the relationship? Who's on the surface? These protectors, the part that's resisting, and the general. And that's why it feels like a battle. What could be done about this? One, let's say there's something that they could do together, and there's something that they could do individually. Let's go to individually first. Let's say one finds themselves in this dance. To Jane, who has this feeling of feeling alone, and as a result, the general comes out. Well, if that feeling alone weren't so painful, then the general wouldn't have to come out as strongly. She could really get to know this feeling of aloneness. There are things that she could do to help unburden this feeling of aloneness. So there are ways that she could do that. She could use IFS therapy. So that would be a process of finding out where she's stuck in the past that has her feeling so alone, and really being there for that alone part in a way that she could have used someone to be there for her at that time. Metaphor being, reparenting the inner child, helping that part of you out with that struggle of feeling alone.
From your higher self.
From your higher self. One other way would be feeling that feeling of aloneness and allowing it to run its course. There's a book that I've read, a number of people I know have read, find it very useful in helping with these vulnerable emotions. It's called Letting Go by David Hawkins. And, that's another way of releasing burdens. It's more somatically focused.
It's about it's not denying the emotion, and it's just letting it flow through you. And if it need be, you could cry the whole emotion out and just acknowledge that it's there and feel it.
Right.
Because the body is holding on to all of these negative emotions, and it just needs a release.
Right. We have a feeling of being alone, and our body contracts against it. And that is the very thing that holds the emotion in place. And it's the same analogy to in IFS, holding on to the burden. And these are just ways they're both doing the same thing, but they're ways of letting go of the burdens, the painful burdens that we're holding on to.
And the IFS is internal family systems, which is the framework that we are discussing, the protectors and the exiles, which are their inner child, and how this whole dance is going on between people. And this, not only applies to relationships, but also applies to friendships and relationships at work. So when you're in a battle with someone and someone just keeps triggering you, this is what's going on.
Right. Letting go of this feeling of being alone, helping to heal this part of you that feels alone, will basically help this to not be as sensitive, so the general doesn't have to come out. And one can just be vulnerable with the other person. That she doesn't have to fight. It doesn't have to be a battle.
What was it that you said was the best thing that she could say to this person? To speak from this place of aloneness, vulnerability.
Okay, right, because that gets at the other layer. What she would say, and this is kind of the second way of what she can do in the relationship, which doing her individual work makes this a lot easier. But when she finds herself in the place where she feels like she's struggling, instead of saying, hey, why are you resisting me? Which just triggers the dominated, controlled, not good enough and causes more resistance. She can do what they would call in IFS and in
the couples therapy version of internal family systems therapy work.
Oh yeah, the couples family version of IFS, intimacy from the inside out, IFIO. Gosh, all these acronyms. That must be confusing you guys. But the U-turn. U-turn is basically taking her focus from, what are you doing? How come you're resisting? To back here. What am I feeling? I'm feeling alone. And going from that place of vulnerability, as opposed to trying to strategize, just saying what she feels. You know what? I feel alone and I miss you.
Has she ever tried that?
Told me she hasn't. I hope she does, and we'll see what happens. But I would imagine if she comes from the place of trying to figure things out and trying to force something to happen in this relationship, or trying to say, how come you keep throwing up excuses, or how come you're resisting? I thought we wanted a connection here. If she does that, she'll get more resistance. But if she just comes from a vulnerable place and says, hey, I miss you. Where have you been? That is most likely to not trigger this part.
Trigger this part that feels dominated or controlled.
Like she's not trying to control him. Right. She's not talking about him. She's not trying to control him. She's just saying, hey, I miss you. I feel alone. And you have someone on the other side who doesn't feel controlled and dominated because she's not trying to. And it's just like, oh, yeah, you miss me. How are you doing? Like, let's talk.
So what are some possible responses that could possibly happen? I mean, that's the ideal answer. That, yeah, let's talk. I didn't know you missed me. I didn't know that that's where you're coming from.
Okay. So, right. If she says, I miss you.
You know what? Let's get another whiteboard here.
Okay. So, if she says, I miss you, he could either say, yeah, I miss you too, which would be the ideal answer. For some people, if this is really sensitive, if the part of not feeling good enough or feeling dominated and controlled, he might perceive that as an attempt to control him. Which, if she does it in terms of a strategy, he might feel the general in there a little bit. If the general's completely stepped back, it's just going to be vulnerability. If he feels this is a strategy to try to control him, then, he's going to resist some more. He might be defensive. He might say, oh, well, this is, some stuff has just come up and, I'm really busy and, sorry, I can't hang out, I'll talk to you later. So the resisting part can come up some more. A really defensive mode, like, she says, I miss you. He really feels controlled or dominated, or, either the most defensive thing you could say is like, that's your problem. You should be taking care of this alone part, stop trying to control me, and that's this resisting part coming out in full blast. An even more vulnerable way to put, I miss you. He could say, well, yeah, like, wow, I didn't know you missed me this whole time. I thought you were trying to control me. And I keep feeling like you're trying to make something happen. And that just puts me on the defensive. But now that I see you opening up, I really feel like being close to you now. And that's what someone who's very self-aware and, able to see this might open up and say that.
But what if I didn't know, all right, let's connect. But for some men, wouldn't that also bring up parts that are afraid of deeper intimacy because they haven't really addressed that I'm not good enough, I'm not man enough, I'm not worthy of love? Wouldn't there be an additional protector that says, ooh, yeah, I didn't know, I appreciate the vulnerability that you miss me, but I'm only going to allow you in this much. Well, I'll call you or whatever. We'll see each other. And then he only goes so far.
Yeah. Well, as long as these parts are here, as long as these parts aren't fully unburdened on either end, you're going to get some degree of protection from that because it's vulnerable. It hurts. One needs to be tolerant of some degree of protecting. That's even on both ends. As long as there is a part that feels alone. There's going to be a little bit of the general there. As long as there's a part that's feeling, dominated or weak or not good enough, there's going to be a little bit of pushing back there. But what we're hoping for, more and more, there'll be a little bit more of this, a little bit more of coming to here and talking either from or for this place that feels vulnerable.
So what, as a man, let's say if you were to pretend that this is the man that your friend is talking about, and you know that you have these not good enough parts, if you do the U-turn, what would you be saying? She says, I feel alone, I miss you. Is he really going to say, I don't feel good enough? That's why I'm not. So this is owning up to the aloneness. I don't know too many men that can own up to not feeling good enough, especially to a woman that they're in a relationship with.
Yeah, I'm sorry you don't know too many men who could do that.
I certainly I have a lot of male friends who are not afraid to tell me, and male clients who are not afraid to tell me about the parts of them that get triggered when they don't feel good enough, when a certain woman acts in a certain way. So they're okay with sharing that with me because I hold the safe space, but they're not in a relationship with me, right? So then if you were the man that was in a relationship with this woman, she activates in you some of these voices like, am I really good enough? How would you own up to that?
How would I own up to that if that
was you, yeah.
If I was capable of owning up to, right, I would say, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm I see that you miss me and I really want to spend time with you. For some reason there might be parts getting in the way of us spending time together. And what really comes up in me is a part that feels control, or a part that feels controlled or feels intimidated. I don't know. I feel as though there might be a part in you that's pushing for something, and there's a part of me that wants to resist. Does that resonate for you, or am I totally off?
Yeah. No. I get that.
So that's how I would respond if we're doing a role play. Okay.
No. Okay. Yeah. No. I get that. And so there's a part that could be feeling controlled. But that's not really owning up to not feeling good enough, which we all have. we're all guilty of not feeling good enough.
Right.
So here I am. Let's say your friend admits to her aloneness.
Right.
I miss you.
Right.
I miss you.
I think we're confusing things here. Because right, if they're, I'm saying these are two possible. These are two possible exiles.
I see. Okay, so you were just speaking for the dominating and control part.
So if this is the thing that is going on for me, and I'm feeling dominated and controlled, then that's okay. If the case is that I feel not good enough, and that's why. So if it is this scenario rather than this scenario, then the response might be, I miss you too. I noticed myself holding back because there's a part of me that doesn't feel really deserving of you, and I just kind of want to distance myself, and that comes up a lot for me.
That's beautiful. So Percy, that was such a beautiful phrase for you to own up to your vulnerabilities as a man, that you don't feel good enough. So why don't we repeat that? There's a part of me, just so that we can model for the men what courageous vulnerability from the masculine perspective looks like, to own up to, I'm not feeling good enough. There's a part of me. It's not all of you, but there's a part of you that doesn't feel good enough.
Interesting, yeah. And when I hear this, I also know that I think it happens on both ends. Like I've definitely seen cases where women resist hanging out with men.
Absolutely.
Because they're not feeling good. They're not feeling like worthy of the man that's there.
Especially with body image issues, because women, the way we are wired, the women are about like, how beautiful can we be? This is back in the cavewoman days. Man is supposed to like be the breadwinner and kill the animals, bring home the bacon, and then the women have to be as beautiful as possible in order to capture the most successful man that could support the family. So a man's mission, biologically wired, is about doing the mission and being financially secure, whereas a woman, it's the images of beauty. And so if a woman doesn't feel worthy, or if they don't have a good self-image around their body and how they look, it's going to be hard for them to feel really good in their body sexually and also in relating to the man. Wondering.
It might say masculine and feminine, because masculine essence and feminine essence. Because times have definitely changed as far as that goes. In any case, if someone, man or woman, is feeling like it is in a situation. And often people find themselves in situations where they're making excuses or not really hanging out with a person that they're not even conscious of. And in that case, what they would say is, I've noticed that I haven't really been connecting as much, and I'm not really sure why that is. And so, that would be one way of saying it, because in a lot of cases you're really not going to know why that is. But let's say you think about it. I find myself putting barriers between us or finding ways to resist our connection. There might be a lot of reasons for that. I mean, I think, one thing is when I start to think about connecting with you, I start feeling insecure. I start feeling like not good enough for you.
Okay, hold on right there. And let's just say that again. When you're asking for this deeper connection, I'm feeling insecure. I mean, just for someone to say I'm feeling insecure, whether it's a man or a woman, that's such a vulnerable place to be. And we hope that the other person can hold space for that, because some people don't know how to hold space for that vulnerability, and they're just like...
Well, the ultimate fear is that if I say that I'm not feeling good enough for you, then you're going to think I'm not good enough, and you're going to run away. That's the fear. So it's a really vulnerable thing to do. So in that moment, when I see you reaching out to me and trying to hang out with me, something comes up in me that just doesn't feel good enough, so I kind of back away. So that would be how that would, an example of how one might say that.
And then the conversation would be like, if the woman or whoever this other partner is can hold space to say, what would you need from me in order for you to feel good enough? Because I know you're good enough. You don't need to prove anything to me. What would you need from me so that you can feel more secure in the connection? And that our connection is not going to bring up further insecurities.
Yeah. I don't think you need to be the one to make me feel secure. I think this is something that I need to deal with on my own. However, I would just like you to be patient with me, and understand that is a vulnerability that I have inside of me.
That I need to work through.
that I
myself first.
That I need to work through myself. And you know, they might be other things. It'd be nice to have a few more compliments or whatever. You know, there might be an answer, or there might be, you know, oh, this is just something that I feel like I need to work on myself. And you're right. And then there's the other situation here.
Feeling dominated and controlled.
Feeling dominated and controlled. So, you know, when you know, asked to hang out with, like, it feels like there's a part of you that's really pushing for something. I feel like I'm on the receiving end and being controlled, and that makes me want to back away. And so that would be an example of how one would say that. Depending on what's going on inside of this person, there could be a million different things. We have no idea.
And then the thing is, how they grew up. You know, they could have witnessed one controlling parent that really, like, freaks them out, so that if anybody has even a little bit of semblance of control, they're reacting in an exaggerated way based on what they witnessed in childhood.
Right.
And so then I think if the partner can also, like, appreciate that, so that she or he can dial down the general that wants to control. It's like, ooh, but that.
You know what? I noticed a connection here to another concept that we talked about regarding monogamous versus non-monogamous relationships. But remember, there is a part. We have parts that are afraid of being controlled and parts that are afraid of being abandoned.
Yes.
So this part that's afraid of being controlled, that would be the exile that's here, and a person that's more afraid of being controlled than being abandoned. And the person that has more of a sensitivity to being abandoned, that's going to be a part that doesn't feel good enough. You know, as it relates to relationships, this is not the case in every situation, but when people are afraid of being controlled, you know, they tend to gravitate more towards open relationships. And people that are more afraid of being abandoned tend to gravitate towards monogamous relationships.
Yeah.
So that might be a hint as to you know, what's underneath here. But in any case, probably some version of both. We all have fears of being dominated. We all have fears of being controlled.
Being abandoned. Yeah.
Being
abandoned, and it's all the degree and really understanding what leads you towards one versus the other, and how do you feel about that. But then the other thing to recognize is that, does that mean that having multiple relationship means, you know what, I really don't need to peel off all my masks and be really naked, metaphorically naked, emotionally naked with this person, because I don't feel safe with just one person being in my life where I'm fully naked, because if that person ultimately rejects me, it's rejecting me. I don't have anything to blame. And that could be driving the need for multiple relationships. You know, it's not a judgment, it's just like understanding where that is. And then for some people, maybe their growth edge is to get to a point where I want to dive all the way into vulnerability, because I want that depth of connection.
Right. And if we're going to address one end, I mean, we want to address the other side too. You know, sometimes people might be afraid of opening up the relationship because they're afraid of being abandoned.
Yeah.
So there's
a lot of layers.
There's a lot of layers. The relationship feels like a battle when we are kind of when we're stuck up here in the protectors. You know, there's resistance and there's a general. However, things get transitioned when we do a U-turn and come around to where we're more vulnerable. Because there you have a part that's saying, yeah, I'm feeling, you know, kind of weak here. I'm feeling kind of dominated or controlled, or I'm feeling not good enough. And communicating with another part that feels, oh, well, you know, I'm feeling alone. You know, how can we help each other with this?
Yeah.
And you're in a much more sensitive and vulnerable relationship that does not feel like a battle. This is a relationship of vulnerability to vulnerability.
How can we help each other? That's the magic. How can we help each other? What are the agreements that we could have? What is something that we can try so that we can meet in the middle ground and satisfy both of our needs without our battle parts coming out and beating each other over the head? If they didn't love each other so much, these battles wouldn't happen. It'd be like, I'm done.
Right. Why stay in here if there's not a vulnerability, if there's not a connection that the two of them appreciate? So.
And this invites the deeper intimacy, the emotional intimacy, which when you drop into this level of vulnerability, this is what increases the connection and the closeness. And this is what can contribute to hotter sex. Right. So it's not about learning different sexual positions or techniques. It's this vulnerability that's going to contribute to the amazing sex that you can have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you might imagine if these two protectors, if the general and the resisting part are having sex, like just not gonna be much fun.
Okay,
They're gonna be. We might do another video on that one. But
but that could be fun sex when you do role play with this. This is like
oh, you know what? That is pretty interesting, right? If you have the right, a lot of people do
conscious awareness, yeah.
Right, that's right. A lot of people do role play like
submissiveness and
dominant.
The dominant.
Right.
That could get played out in the bedroom.
Well, yeah. I mean, the dominant submissive would be, general to dominated, right?
Yeah.
But there's also consensual non-consent. Do you know what that is?
No.
So consensual non-consent is a fantasy which the key to this is that it has to be consensual. But it is where two people play out or have a role play planned where one person forces the other person to have sex. It is consensual. They discuss it beforehand, so they actually agree on it. But there are a lot of people who have rape fantasies. Like, certainly unethical to do this when it's not planned ahead of time, when it's not discussed, when there's not safe words, when we're not in agreement that this is happening.
Yeah.
But right, that would be a case where there's a dominant part and a part that's actually resisting, and that's part of the fantasy.
And this is what also makes things in the bedroom more interesting when you have the courage to take on the different roles. And again, it's about accessing different parts of us, because we all have general parts and resisting parts and parts that want to be dominated. And for some of you, it may be totally dormant. You're like, what? I have that part? Mm-hmm. It's like all parts are welcome, and it's up to you as you grow older whether or not you wanna like get that part out of the dark closet.
Right. There are all sorts of parts that might want to be experienced in a sexual situation.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's wrap this up to give them the final conclusions about the key to overcoming this stalemate and this battle.
Great. So if your relationship feels like a battle, your relationship is by definition protector to protector. One person is fighting for something, the other person is resisting, right? And these are parts that are not vulnerable. They are in battle mode. In
war, yeah.
Right.
To see who's going to win.
Right. And so the relationship is all here in this level. And to do this, to help this problem, one person, and hopefully the other person will follow, has to go back to the vulnerable place. And so we are transitioning from a protector to protector relationship to an exile to exile relationship. One person has to say, hey, I miss you, or I'm not feeling worthy, or I'm feeling something that is really difficult to say, something that is vulnerable, and hopefully the other person can reciprocate and be vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
And when you're there, you have a teammate now. You have someone who's saying, oh, I don't want you to feel not good enough. How can I help? Or I don't want you to feel good enough. How can I help? Or I don't want you to feel alone. How can I help?
Yeah. And this is where one person really has to take the risk to be vulnerable, because otherwise you're going to remain in this stalemate and the relationship doesn't grow. So in order to grow a relationship, there has to be risk, this kind of risk. Right. The risk can come where you're going to get rejected. The best answer, the most hopeful answer is, I miss you. I didn't know that you miss me. But then if they're saying, I'm busy, or like, that's your problem, then you got to step back to say, okay, a part of me is disappointed that we're not able to have this conversation, and I'll try again. I hope that we can try again.
Yeah.
Because I want this to work, because I don't want to keep in the battle. And this is where you just have to think to yourself, okay, how much more work am I willing to try to invite the vulnerability from the other person? And how much more am I going to try before I just say, you know what, this is just not going to work?
Right. If that person gives one of those defensive responses, then this person would still need to go back to the place where they feel
alone again, because they didn't get the response that
I'm still feeling alone. I still miss you, right? I'm not trying to make you do anything or anything like that, but I still miss you.
Yeah, I like that. I still miss you. Okay, all right. I just want to know I still miss you, and I hope that we
whenever
can
you're ready to hang out, we can.
Yeah. So this is having a backup response. If you do get a defensiveness from the other person, it's like, okay, I still miss you.
Right. That backup response still, if it's going to work, it needs to be from the vulnerable place. When the other person, if the other person responds defensively, and you respond defensively, you're back in your
battle.
again.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I still miss you, and I hope that we can try this again.
Right.
I'm willing to give it a shot when you're ready.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So maybe so saying that again, being in that vulnerable place again, is like creating additional safety for the other person to say, they didn't beat me over the head
Yeah.
for my dumbass response.
Right. And that way they don't have to feel criticized, they don't have to feel not good enough, they don't have to feel like they're being controlled or dominated. If you happen to be blessed to be the first person in the relationship that realizes that you're in a battle, and that would make it your goal, because the other person isn't aware enough to really notice and make the U-turn, but that would make it your goal to make the U-turn. You might need to take this stance a number of times, the stance of being vulnerable. Eventually, this person is probably going to get it and go to their vulnerable side as well. If they don't, then you're just repeatedly injured. It might not be the person for you. It might not be the same level of...
might not be the relationship for you. And also to recognize that when you say, I miss you, you really have to drop into that energy of vulnerability where they could feel it from your heart.
Yeah.
If you're just saying, I miss you from your head,
right,
it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's going to trigger off these parts. She's trying to control me. So
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much concludes it. We need to go from this place of protector to protector to the place of vulnerability to vulnerability. And that's how the two of you get on the same side.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Cool. All right. If you have any questions, just ask it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and share, and so you could get more great content from us.
Absolutely. And you left me hanging. Awesome.
Take care.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.